Good day everyone, and welcome to our webinar about expert advisor writing. My name is Dmitry, and my colleague Dylan today will present to you this webinar. As always, please feel free to contact us in the live chat if you will have any questions. And now we will begin.
Hello and welcome to our last webinar in this series. Today we are going to write a robot which will work based on candlesticks. Before we begin, let's repeat what candlestick is and how do we read a candles. Let's take example candle, this blue candle, and see what this candle shows us. We can also click here on data window in order to see a data of candle. So what does this candle shows us? So this, the very top, is called the high price. It's the very high price within this period of candle. And also we can see this high price on the left side in the data window. I'll try to show you. Here we can see that the high price is 1.0917. Then there's an open price. For the blue candle, the open price is here on top. And the next is the close price. It's the price at the very last minute when the candle was formed. And the last is the low price. It's the very lowest price at that given period. In this case, I have selected 30 minutes candlestick chart, and that means in those 30 minutes the lowest price was 1.0903. So that's how the candles are being read. As next step, we will try to add or apply this logic to our robot. We will make the robot to read the candles. And before we begin, as usual, here on the left side in Navigator, we need to create a new expert advisor. So we click and create in Meta Editor. Here we take expert advisor template. Now we give a name for our robot. So I will call it webinar 27. Okay, that one exists, so I'll take webinar 28. Don't change anything here. Also don't change anything here, and finish. Here in the template, let's delete everything except we leave on tick function. Delete everything else. First step, what we will do, we will detect the last candle and see what prices are for the very last candle. So we will print out those candle values and see if they are correct when comparing to the chart. So first we are going to get a high price, the very high price of the candle. And the function to get that is also called high. And here within the scopes, we need to add which candle. So basically we need to tell the robot for which candle we are willing to get a high price. And let's put 0 here. And what does 0 means? Let's go back to the client's terminal. And let me show how robot knows which candle to take. So the very last candle, which is currently being information yet, it's the candle with index 0. And the one before is candle with index 1. And next in history is number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So the candles are being counted. The very last is the 0 one, and every next candle in history is +1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we start counting from the very last and back in the history. Let's go back to the editor. So we indicated number 0, so it will be very last candle which is currently being in process, which is not closed yet. And let's see if we can get a high price of this very last candle. Before we launch our code, as usual, we need to compile it and see if there are any errors. We have 0 errors, which means the code is ready to launch. Let's go back to the client's terminal and find our EA. I called it webinar 28. So let's apply it. Attach to the chart. Confirmation, okay. Now let's go here in the experts part and see if we get a high price of this last candle printed here. We need to wait a tick. It's very calm market. We need to a little bit wait for the next tick. So the high price is 1.0910. Let me show you here in data window. So here the high price we can see is 1.0910, sorry. Yes, and that's exactly what we see here, 1.091. Once again, see the high price is 1.0910. And that's exactly what we see here printing in messages. So robot found the correct very last candle. Now let's try to read a previous candle, this one, the blue one, with the high price of 1.0917. Let's go back to the editor and we can simply change high with index 0 and change index to the number 1 and hit compile. And now let's check what we get now out of the robot. So in this case, now we are checking this candle, the blue one, with the high price 1.0917. Now I expect this to be printed here in messages. Yes, that's exactly what is happening. So our robot is now reading the one candle before. So that is how we read a candles. That's how robot knows which candle he need to check. Now let's try to apply something more interesting and try to draw an arrow above the candle, above the specific candle. Let's go back to the editor. And now let's create an object with function object create. We need to give a name, so it will be arrow number 1. We want to create object arrow which is pointed downwards. Object type we don't need, so we put 0. And next parameter we need to put time. So basically, to create object, the object needs to know where to draw it, and it is based on time. Let's go back to the client's terminal. So we need to tell the object to be drawn on this candle, and this candle is identified by date time, which is 2016 October 28 with the time 10:30. So we need to give this time to the object, and we can get time by function time at specific candle. So we want the blue candle, which is the previous candle, which was with the index number 1. The same we did here. So we got a high price for the candle with index 1, and now we get a time for the candle with index 1. Next is the price. We need to give a price at which to draw an arrow. So we will draw an arrow at the high price. So it will be on top of candle. We'll draw at high price for the candle number 1. And we will draw a little bit higher, not directly on the candle, but a little bit above. And let's add some 10 points above it. So right now we will draw an arrow at specific time, which is for candle number 1. And we will be drawing at the high price plus 10 pips. So it will be a little bit higher. Before we create object, we need to clear a chart. So there should be no other objects before we draw a new one. So we need to clear a chart. So objects, delete all. So first parameter is chart ID. If we put 0, it will use as a current chart. Sub window, we don't need this parameter. That means -1. And object type, if we put -1, it will delete all objects. So we will delete all objects, then we will create the first arrow, and the last step is we need to give a color for the arrow. and it can be done with object set integer. So we will set a parameter. So for the chart 0, which is current chart, and for next is the name of object, and we called it arrow number 1, so we put the same name here. So we will be changing color for arrow number 1. Now next parameter is what exactly we are willing to change. So we want to change object property, and the property name is color. So we will be changing a color. And the last parameter is what kind of color. So we can put color, let's say red. So right now we have 3 steps how we will be drawing an arrow. So first we delete, then we create an object, and the last step we will set a color red. Let's see if it works. Let's hit compile. There are no errors. Let's go back to the client's terminal. And yes, we can see here a red arrow which we draw at the previous candle. And it is a little bit higher because we took a high price plus 10 pips. So therefore that's why it's drawn a little bit higher. If we do mouse over the arrow, we can see the name. So it's the arrow number 1 at the price 1.0926. Now let's add a little algorithm. Let's draw an arrow only if specific criteria is met. Let's check the chart. Let's, for example, do the criteria if this high price is higher than this one, then draw an arrow, and if not, which is our case, then there will be no arrow. So the arrow will be only drawn if the high price will be higher than previous candle's high price. And how do we do it? We simply do it with help of if statement. So if the high price of previous candle, so one before the first candle, which means is with the index 2, if the high price of previous is lower than high price of the current or previous candle, then only then we will draw an arrow. If not, we should see no arrow being drawn on the chart. So if the statement is correct, there should be no arrow on the chart because this criteria is added. Let's go back to the terminal and see what happened. And we see there is no arrow anymore. Let's check once more why. Because this candle's high is higher than this one. And that's exactly what criteria we added. This one is higher, and therefore there is no arrow. Now let's add the last step, let's check not specific candles, but let's check like 100 candles in history. So how do we do it? We can do it with help of for cycle. We will put checking into the cycle. So we will be checking 100 candles. So integer I evens 100, that means we will check the 100 candles in the history. So if the I while the I is higher or even the 1, then the cycle need to keep checking. So once the cycle comes to the candle with index 0, then the checking will stop. So we will be checking 100 candles, and the last candle we will check will be with the index 1. So the candle with the index 0 will not be checked. Now we need to do more adjustments to the code in order this to work. So before we entered a specific number, so it's a specific candle, but right now we are willing to check based on the cycle. So we will be checking the candle I, which is the candle based on the cycle, and the candle I plus 1. And the plus 1 means one candle back. So we are checking one candle back with the current candle. So that's how the for cycle helps us to go through the candles in history. Another thing, we need to create or to give a name for every arrow. So the arrow name will be equals arrow plus I value. So basically, each arrow name will be arrow number 1, the next one will be arrow number 2, arrow number 3, etc. So that every arrow is named differently. We cannot name with the same name every arrow. So here on the object create, we put a specific name, which is not changing. Right now we switch it to the arrow name, which is being based on this. So on every cycle there will be new arrow name. And we change the same for setting the color. The last adjustment, we also need to change the time. Before we got time from the candle number 1, but right now we want to get from the I value, which is based on the cycle. Also, we can comment out this line, which is not needed because we will have red arrows above the candles. If everything correct, we hit compile, and let's see how it works in the client's terminal. Right now, on the next tick, I expect the arrows to be drawn. Yes, and we see several red arrows. So our code analyzed every candle in history based on our criteria. So what was our criteria? Let's go back. So criteria is if the previous candle's high is lower than current one, then we draw an arrow. If the previous candle's high is higher than the current one, then there will be no arrow. And let's see, is this how it's done on the chart. Let's go back to the client's terminal. And let's take, for example, the very first arrow. So it's drawn here because this high is higher than this one. And that is correct. Now let's go. We checked this candle. Now let's check the next one, this one, the blue one. So here is no arrow. And there is no arrow because this high is lower than the previous one. So criteria is not met, and that's exactly how we put this in robot. The next candle we have an arrow, and that is because this high is higher than the previous one. So the algorithm is working correctly. Basically, this is the very simple and the very basic way how the robot analyzes the candles. For today's webinar, this is it. This was the very basis, and based on such algorithm, you can add any other filters or algorithms how to identify specific candles. Based on this, you can build robots which are finding a different patterns based on candles. For example, like doji candle are often used, or double top candle. Any specific candle type can be easily detected with such arrows. So the robot draws an arrow for you, and you can quickly see what's needed for you. And that's how robot helps to analyze a chart based on your criteria and your needs. If you have any specific question, please feel free. You can ask it right now, or if later you have any question, you just simply send an email, and I will try to answer to all of emails. If you have any specific question, as usual, the recording of webinar will be available on website, same as the code, so you will be able to copy this code and try to run on your own PC and see if it works the same as it worked just on my computer. This was a little bit harder webinar than we did the previous, so yes, feel free to send an email and ask if something is not working. I will try to answer and try to make it work. Okay, thank you very much for attending our webinar, and stay tuned for the next webinars. Info will be available on the website. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.